Hello and welcome. My name is Karen Brady. I work as an educational consultant with the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. This session you are about to view is referred to as a quick pick and is intended to help you build on your understanding of a given topic. Today, we will be reviewing the use of curriculum-based measurement to calculate rate of improvement in order to assess a student's response to intervention in the area of reading. The mission of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, PaTTAN, is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local educational agencies to serve students who receive special education services. Our goal for each child is to ensure individualized education program IEP teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. During the next half hour, we will underscore the importance of CBM within a response to intervention model as it relates to informing our instructional intensity. We will be discussing the assessment of incremental growth in reading over a given period of time and a free high-quality resource available to you. Let's get started. You'll need something to write with for this initial task. Think about how you currently use data to inform your reading instruction and take 2 minutes to identify these data sources. As teachers, we are constantly observing students during small and whole group literacy instruction and administering routine assessments that are included in our district assessment plans or built into our core reading programs. We also conduct a great deal of informal formative assessment like ticket out the door or the use of whiteboards. As effective reading teachers, we use a continuum of informal and formal measures to assess student response to our instruction. Today, we are going to review why and how CBM can be used routinely to help assess reading growth and inform instruction. I bet some of you are bakers at home. So why do we use a toothpick when we bake a cake? We may want to know if the oven is the right temperature. We may need to see if the cake needs more time. We may want to assess if we think we have baked a delicious cake. When we progress monitor using CBM, we are in essence conducting the toothpick test. We are checking to see if our instruction is matched to student need. We are assessing the student's performance within a given group size. We are determining if the student would benefit from more instructional time. And we are assessing other variables related to instructional intensity. We have to conduct the toothpick test using CBM and other data sources over the course of a day, week, month, and school year to make timely and valid instructional decisions for students. Why would you want to use curriculum-based measurement to regularly inform core and supplemental reading instruction? CBM reading indicators are reliable and valid. They have been around for 30 years. CBM reading indicators are relatively easy to administer because they are standardized and they generally take about 1 to 3 minutes. CBM reading indicators are sensitive to incremental growth. They tell us quickly who is making typical weekly growth in reading versus who is not. Finally, CBM results are linked to the big ideas of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, and the 4-part processing system that our brains use to develop proficiency in reading. Student performance on CBM indicators helps us as teachers to do brain imaging without actually giving an MRI. Curriculum-based measures in reading are a viable alternative to other reading achievement measures that have limitations in their frequency of use, the time they take to administer, and their instructional utility. In fact, many of the measures we currently administer do not directly inform instruction. Moreover, when we administer oral reading fluency, one CBM reading indicator, we are getting much more than an assessment of reading fluency. We are getting information about a child's reading brain and every other child's reading brain, and whether we have appropriately programmed them to fire for the remainder of their schooling and into adulthood. According to Fuchs, Dino, and Merkin, research has demonstrated that when teachers use CBM to inform their instructional decision-making, students learn more, teacher decision-making improves, and students are more aware of their own performance. You may be wondering if there are any resources that exist to help you learn more about CBM and progress monitoring in general. PaTTAN endorses the National Center for Intensive Intervention at www.intensiveintervention.org. You will see the Tools Chart tab and a judicious review of progress monitoring measures. There are also articles and webinars related to universal screening and progress monitoring using curriculum-based measurement. When you have the opportunity, familiarize yourself with the National Center's resources. For progress monitoring measures, try selecting a subject area and a grade band. You will see all the available tools and their psychometric properties. That means how they fare in terms of their reliability and validity, as well as cost and time involved. Now we are going to talk about using CBM to calculate rate of improvement. But first, let's talk about what rate of improvement, ROI, is. Technically speaking, ROI is derived using a mathematical formula. You may remember this from your middle school years. When we look at ROI, we are looking at growth through slope. That is, how slow or fast is a given student learning, growing, basically responding to our reading instruction and intervention. This is an example of a progress monitoring graph and slope using Intervention Central's ChartDog Graph Maker. ChartDog allows us to calculate ROI effortlessly and determine how slow is slow relative to our efforts to get our students to respond to our reading instruction and intervention. How do you think this student is doing? In a response to intervention model, we are especially interested in assessing how quickly our students are growing and closing their gaps in reading. One way we can assess this to compare students' reading performance to the benchmark reading goal. Remember, the fall, winter, and spring benchmark goals represent the minimum standard that we want all students to reach or exceed, including the lowest performing student in a given grade level. The other way we can determine whether a student's response is too slow is to compare the student's performance with that of a larger national sample of students at his or her age grade and customize their goal. An interim customized goal may be set for a student if the benchmark goal does not seem realistic or attainable. In response to intervention, we refer to this as problem solving, highly customized problem solving. We talked about using CBM to assess how slow is slow or rate of progress, but what about the student's level? How low is low? Curriculum-based measurement can be used for that too. When we administer universal screening, we are conducting benchmark assessment using CBM. Benchmarks have been established for fall, winter, and spring for each grade level and can tell us how far below grade level a student is performing, in addition to how slow a student may be responding to our instruction and intervention. Here are some important terms that you need to know when calculating rate of improvement. Typical rate of improvement, targeted rate of improvement, and attained rate of improvement. Typical rate of improvement is determined by looking at what we can expect most of our students to learn each week that will then give us a cumulative sense of typical growth from fall to winter benchmarks, winter to spring benchmarks, or from fall to spring benchmarks. The targeted rate of improvement is calculated by using the starting point of the student's performance and calculating that to the next benchmark point. For example, when setting goals, we often use the end of the year as our benchmark target, and therefore the targeted rate of improvement becomes that benchmark. The attained rate of improvement is the actual slope, or the actual rate of improvement attained by the student. We often use the word slope as synonymous with rate of improvement. This is what the student actually performs through progress monitoring. Let's take a close look. First, let's look at the green line. These 3 data points on the green line are the typical benchmark scores for DIBELS oral reading fluency for 3rd grade. This line depicts how the typical student would progress in oral reading fluency throughout the year. The dotted red line is the student's actual performance, starting at 40 words correct per minute for this student, moving to 56 words correct per minute to 71 words correct per minute over the school year. The blue line is the target or aim for the growth we want students to achieve to close the achievement gap. The student will have to grow quickly or ambitiously to reach benchmark in a year. In the yellow boxes, we can see the rates of improvement for each period: fall to winter, winter to spring, and fall to spring. In this graph, the red line shows that the student's growth is below the typical rate and far below the targeted rate set for this student. Looking at the ROI calculation, the student grew 0.8 words correct per minute as compared to the typical, which is 0.9 words correct per minute, and the targeted 1.9 words correct per minute. Rate of improvement gives us a mathematical calculation to compare student growth to what is typical or what is needed, which we call the target. Typical rate of improvement is calculated by subtracting the benchmark scores and dividing that score by 18 weeks for a semester or 36 weeks for the entire school year. This is how typical students grow. Target rate of improvement is calculated by taking the ending benchmark score, subtracting the initial score, and dividing that number by the number of weeks, either 18 or 36 weeks. That's the amount of growth the student needs to close the gap. These are several ways to calculate rate of improvement. Ordinary least squares is the most defendable way to determine attained rate of improvement or slope. Trend line rules are overwhelmingly recommended in the research literature. Some other methods include the two-point method, which is what we just used to calculate typical and targeted rate of improvement. The modified two-point method takes the median of the first 3 data points and the median of the last 3 data points into the calculation. The Tukey method divides scores into 3 equal groups, divides the groups with vertical lines. In the first and third groups, one finds the median data point and median week and marks it with an X, and then draws a line between the 2 X's. The OLS calculation of attained rate of improvement uses essentially a linear regression. The linear regression is a mathematical process that establishes a straight line that cuts through a series of data points. We call this a linear trend in the data. There are other kinds of trends in data one can talk about, but we talk about the linear trend, and that is what the ordinary least squares regression, OLS, is for calculating rate of improvement. This approach takes into account all the data points in the series. It does require a mathematical calculation that's best left to software to do. This is not something that one does by hand or a calculator. There are many charting systems available to calculate rate of improvement using the ordinary least squares method. PaTTAN endorses ChartDog, which is available on the Intervention Central website at www.interventioncentral.org. ChartDog allows you to examine student progress by evaluating trend lines, or how low is low and how slow is slow. There are 3 main lines of comparison you will want to know when charting data points to help determine a student's growth. The goal line is just that. This line shows over time where the end goal is on the visual chart. This could be set as the benchmark goal that is given with a specific curriculum-based measure for winter or spring. Think of the goal line as where you want the student to be. The aim line, or the target, depicts the needed or targeted growth that a student needs to make over time to reach the established reading goal. The trend line, which is synonymous with slope, is the actual growth that the student is making over time. It is the comparison of these 3 lines, along with other information, that helps problem-solving teams within a tiered system of support make critical decisions about the intensity of core and supplemental reading instruction relative to student needs and response. Here's an example of how these 3 comparison lines would look on a chart using ChartDog GraphMaker over the course of a school year from fall to spring. This is a graph of a 3rd grade student's oral reading fluency, and we can see that the black goal line remains constant across time and is set for the spring benchmark goal of 110 words correct per minute. The blue line, the aim line, starts at the student's initial score in the fall, 40 words correct per minute and ends at the student goal of 110 words correct per minute. This is our target rate of improvement that we want our student to make over time to reach the goal. We can determine how many words correct per week this student needs to learn by subtracting the starting point of 40 from the goal of 100 and divide that amount by the number of weeks in between. This student's targeted ROI is to read 1.94 words correct per minute per week. The red data points inform the red dotted trend line, or the student's actual rate of improvement. The data points are collected and entered weekly over the school year. Educators and families can use this information to determine whether additional changes may be made to accelerate growth or whether this student may need further evaluation. So if we go to the data analysis section of ChartDog GraphMaker, one notices the tab Trend Line, Ordinary Least Squares. When we click on that tab, the slope or attained rate of improvement is calculated and reported for you looking at all the data points in the data set. ChartDog calculates a daily slope, so we would need to multiply that number, which is 0.22 words correct, by 7 to get a weekly rate of improvement of 1.54 words correct per week. So the question remains, how did the student grow over the school year toward the goal that the problem-solving team established? We know that the target rate of improvement, or the growth that was needed, is 1.94 words correct per minute, and the attained rate of improvement was 1.54 words correct per minute. The student made a lot of growth in reading this year, however, did not quite reach that benchmark goal. The problem-solving team would discuss the student's progress periodically throughout the school year, and at the end of the year to determine the next steps in reading instruction. Let's take a look at this second grade student. This student in second grade is coming into the school year reading 23 words correct per minute and is making lots of errors and is only 85% accurate in his reading. Take a look at this chart and compare the attained rate of improvement to the typical and target rate of improvement, and also how the student performs as compared to the benchmark score of 90 words correct per minute with 95% accuracy for the end of the year. I'm going to ask you to pause the recording and take 2 minutes to analyze this graph and write down your observations. I'm sure you noticed that this student made a lot of great progress this year. I can see that visually from the graph, that the dotted red trend line or slope is above the black aim line. I also notice that this student met that grade level benchmark goal of 90 words correct per minute with at least 95% accuracy. That's a lot of improvement in the ability to read words accurately with fluency to allow the student to focus on reading comprehension. Way to go! Did you notice that the attained rate of improvement was 1.96 words correct, which is higher than the typical second grade student grows? The student needed to reach a target rate of improvement of 1.86 words correct per minute. This student exceeded that rate of improvement as well. So I can see visually and mathematically that this student is growing. This is cause to celebrate and to reflect on all the great instruction and progress of the student. This is a really powerful piece of information to share with the student, teachers, and the family. Let's take a look at another student's graph. This student is also in second grade and is coming into the school year reading 23 words correct per minute and is making lots of errors and is only 85% accurate in his reading. Take a look at this chart and compare the attained rate of improvement to the typical and targeted rate of improvement, and also how the student performs as compared to the benchmark score of 90 words correct per minute with 95% accuracy for the end of the year. Again, I'm going to ask you to pause the recording and take 2 minutes to analyze this graph and data. Write down your observations. I'm sure you noticed that this student made a great deal of progress this year as well. However, the student did not reach the end of the year goal or their targeted rate of improvement. I can see that visually from the graph that the dotted red trend line or slope is above the black aim line in the beginning of the data set, and then in the winter began to fall below the aim line. This student's rate of improvement was 1.47 words correct per minute over the course of the school year, and improved at a rate that was above the typical rate of improvement of 1.38 words correct per minute, but did not quite reach the target rate of improvement of 1.86 words correct per minute. Did you notice that the student's accuracy rate is weak and could be having an impact on the student's progress? This data graph serves as a piece of information for further discussion by the problem-solving team to evaluate the individual needs of the student and the instructional match so that the student's rate of improvement can be increased with a more robust intervention plan. Again, in this instance, this is a really powerful piece of information to share with the student and their family. We have mentioned that assessing a student's growth through rate of improvement is part of a larger problem-solving process and necessitates the establishment of knowledgeable and experienced cross-disciplinary problem-solving teams. Problem-solving teams are comprised of practitioners and family members that yield individual and collective strengths to the decision-making process while relying upon evidence-based reading practices and the use of a continuum of reliable and valid data sources such as CBM. Calculating ROI is an important part of problem solving in a response to intervention model because it helps the team reliably answer how slow is slow and how low is low relative to their instruction and intervention within the context of the general education setting and their tiered system of support. The problem-solving team has much to consider when designing instruction and intervention and making those important data-based decisions. What does the student need? How will we coordinate a daily instructional and intervention diet to meet his or her needs? Which evidence-based reading practices will we employ and how are they matched to student need? Is there room to make our reading instruction and intervention more explicit and systematic? Was the student able to respond often and receive immediate feedback given their group size? Was instruction delivered with fidelity? For more information on progress monitoring, ROI, and related topics, please visit the MTSS and Literacy Educational Initiatives within our PaTTAN website. Also, remember to explore the range of high-quality resources on the National Center on Intensive Intervention. Thank you for joining me today and taking the time to watch this quick pick.